All right, good morning. We are going to focus on maximizing small group time this morning. And this loops in nicely with our next coffee chat too about organizing data. So we'll kind of leave off right then and then we'll pick up next week. But lots of ideas here this morning about small group time. And for those of you who don't know, we're the Diverse Learners Cooperative, a nonprofit organization that connects teachers and leaders with professional learning resources and networks to improve outcomes for diverse learners and specifically to increase teacher and leader retention, as we know that's a primary barrier for our diverse learners in schools. So we're glad to have you here this morning with us and to look into what a small group look like and how can we improve our students' abilities to learn through small group intervention. We're going to start with the purposes of small groups, talk about a primary tension in small group planning, some strategies you can use, and then some resources. So what are the purposes of small groups? So small group structures allow for targeted or leveled content that matches our students' needs. More opportunities to practice. You know, when there's less students, more students have an opportunity to contribute either through like oral contribution or even through written contribution. There's more chances to practice. And then frequent and individualized feedback to the smaller group of students. We may use small group to do the following things. We could reteach grade level content. We can extend time or practice with a text or with a set of problems. We can build foundational skills, or sometimes we just have a small group because students need a place where they can focus and be less distracted by the whole class, right? Whether students or just the environment is distracting. And so we may use small group to provide a more focused environment. So for literacy, that may look like guided reading groups, skill instruction, additional time with complex text that they may be reading in their core content class or as part of the core content or core curriculum, or a structured writing group. For math, we're talking about groups that maybe focus on building fluency, math applications like word or story problems, skill instruction, and then additional time with core content as well. So lots of reasons that we may have small groups. Right, when we plan small groups, there's often a line that we walk between consistency and flexibility. So things that we may want to keep consistent are the days of the week that we meet, the time of day that we meet, student expectations, the routine, the format or the platform that we're using, especially when we're talking virtually so that students feel like they know what to expect and how to navigate those materials. And then how we're distributing information. We want to keep those things consistent. And then flexible, we can flex groupings. We can flex different kinds of text and text types, different subject areas that were covered through those texts, levels of work and assignments that are needed in order to push students further wherever their development is. And then the use of materials, right? So we can use manipulatives and math, and that can be some sense of variability in our planning for small group. So in striking this balance between consistency and flexibility, what are the must-haves for small group instruction? We're going to kind of take it from the beginning and go through the assessment portion. Ooh, click. Maybe. Oops, now it's clicked all of them. All right, we first are going to set the schedule, but we're going to make room for variability. So first, consider the time of day. What time of day will your students be most likely to attend and engage? Is it before class gets started? Is it during the literacy or math block, before or after a lunch break, or at the end of the day? Consider when your students, and that may vary based on their age, when they'll be most likely to engage in the content. And then post and reference the schedule that you have. And schedule, yes, like when in the day is small group going to happen, but also the schedule within your small group. So I really love this one. It's these are probably 5 to 10 minute sections of the small group lesson. And they give a sense to students and has the paired visual of what exactly is expected of them. So when we get to the debrief and I see the picture of the girl talking, I am going to be kind of on point to be ready to contribute to the conversation. Reference this schedule as you go. You know, sometimes when I had visual schedules like this, I would turn over the card when we finish that part. It gives students a real sense of success and forward progress, and gives them a sense of like, how much longer do we have to do this? And sometimes that's what students need. You can use visual timers to help that along as well. And then offer choice and variability within this schedule. So choices that you could leave up to students depending on their developmental the developmental appropriateness of it, right? Seating and writing materials. Am I going to write in colored pencils today? What color am I going to write with? Am I going to sit on a more flexible seating option, the wiggle cushion or the ball? And those sorts of choices are not only support student learning, but support student autonomy. The greeting that we do, we could have choice boards or menus. We could do a brain break in our small group time, or even the order of activities sometimes can be swapped around if students want to do partner work before they do independent work or things like that. So that's an opportunity to give students choices. And then offer variability. Are there teacher-directed activities, peer-supported learning, independent time? Are there online and offline activities? Are there manipulatives that are going to support the learning? So mixing it up is going to feel more engaging for students for sure. Then we set the space, but then we allow individuals to use that space. When I did small groups, I always, if I could, in the transition time, I set my table. I gave them all the materials that they needed at their table, or in a way that could later ease transitions between materials so that we did not waste time. As soon as my students came in, they could see that the table was set. It's like coming home and seeing that your kitchen table is already set for you. You're ready for a meal. And so that's the same way that we can do with our students in the classroom, and becomes really important in this COVID time, right? So that we're not passing materials and not as, gives us an opportunity to get them what they need without being in their 6 feet of space. We can do this virtually as well. I've linked here an article about HyperDocs. But basically, if you are online and they have one place where they can get to all of the links they need for that small group lesson, then they're just going to be at a lot better place to organize themselves at home. So think about the use of Google Docs or some other version where they have everything they need to set their table or set their computer screen ready for work. This can also ease transitions between coming and going between activities, making sure materials are easily accessible, that we practice transitions and do them consistently so that students know what to expect, and then use visuals like timers or picture cues or models. We can say, match this picture. This is what your desk should look like, or this is what your computer or your assignment should look like. And finally, in our space, we can play to the senses. So is there a different need that students have in order to best learn, whether we're talking about a water bottle next to their desk or lighting or a particular seating or fidget arrangement? We can use that as well. We can flex grouping. So we use instructional levels and data to guide our grouping decisions. Groups can meet for as long or as short as needed. They might be the same for a few days, or they might be the same for a longer period of time. We can use stations and breakout rooms, plan and practice those transitions. And when in doubt, just begin. Students are more flexible than we are. So if we need to pivot after a few lessons, that's okay. So just get started. And then my biggest advice during this time of virtual learning has been sometimes you just have to get smaller. In a virtual setting or even in an in-person setting, it is so valuable to meet individual needs in smaller groups. And so I would rather meet with 3 students for 15 minutes and then another 3 students for another 15 minutes than meet with 6 students for 30. Yeah, Carla's with me. So really think about how to target skills that way.
I'm so glad you said that, because that was going to be one of my questions today. And I just started doing that, like coming back from the new year. And for you to say it, it just gave me confirmation that, oh, I'm on the right target, because that's what I've been doing,
Good.
breaking it in
I'm so
15 minutes
glad.
with smaller groups. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we can definitely talk about that more if you want. The fourth is to set and then state the learning target. So here we almost always have a content objective, but even if you are not teaching ELs, I would really encourage you to think about the language objective. For our diverse learners, whether students with disabilities or students that just need more support within a small group, what is the language that is going to be required of them in this small group lesson? So if the content objective is to identify the main characters in the story, then the language objective might be the student will read aloud the story, and then they'll discuss those events using specific words like first, next, and last. And so when we pair those together, we really get out what supports our students might need in order to accomplish that objective. Consider how students will use all four of the language domains, and then get specific. Name exactly what the student will, like how you will know the student will meet the objective, and tell them so that they know what to expect. You can use tech-related terminology that we've all learned in the last year: chatbots, type, video conference, all of those things. Add those objectives to student-facing materials. Refer back to them often through the chat box or during your presentation, and then ask students to name the language objective when they're using it. Before we start saying first, next, and last, we can say, this was our objective. We are going to retell the story using first, next, and last, and they will be much closer to being able to do that if they know what they're doing, and they can say, yes, I did that. So that's really important, is to set and state the content objective. When we talk about the content, we know that students have difficulty accessing grade level standards. We also know they have gaps in foundational skills. And the thing that gets us most stuck is, then what do we do with our small group time? Do we go backwards, or do we start with the grade level content? And the key here is to weave those together, to provide opportunities for both, to prioritize the most essential prerequisite skills for the upcoming prioritized most important content. So those would be like the power standards, or standards that you are prioritizing, and then you can work backwards. When we're working on the skills that they need in order to master grade level content, then they're going to be successful not only in small group, but more successful in their core content classes. We connect the learning experiences and intervention with the core instruction. There's a link right here to a sample week at a glance of what this looks like for a math class. But basically, on Monday, we are pre-teaching what's coming up in the class that week, so that when they see it, they're more able to have, to master those skills in the core content class. Then we're teaching prerequisite skills, and then we're spending one day to assess what they can do independently. So weave those together. And maximize time on text. Is the text an appropriate level? Is it connected to their own experiences? Does it help them build background? Is it a range of characters and subjects? High interest, low readability. If you get stuck, if we have reluctant readers, that's the best search term. We can find some good texts that are high interest, low readability, and then a variety and options. And then, of course, bring the fun, right? There's so many ways that we can make small group fun. Here's a bunch of different options and a resource for how to pick really great books for your library, as well as a picture of Fort Friday that one class was doing, right? There's lots of ways that you can bring the fun into our small group learning. We can make it into a game. Collaborating on a single document is really engaging for students. That can be fun because you can see what your peers are typing at the same time as you. Google Docs and Google Slides are so good for that. And then add manipulatives to your lesson. Just being able to move and it being targeted toward a learning objective can be really helpful. Finally, see progress. So we can see progress when we implement these strategies. We're going to see our students make progress, but how do we know and support them in the moment? Prompting is an excellent way to provide support, but also to understand what students know. Here linked is a math prompting guide and a writing prompting guide, and then the reading prompting guides from Fontes and Pinnell. So having these on your clipboard, having them next to you while you're virtually teaching, and being able to ask the right questions to help our students get to the next step and to understand what they know. And formative assessment. So build in times to understand what your students know and can do independently. We get stuck in the exit ticket game. Exit tickets can be really, really helpful, but there's lots of other ways that we can know what our students know. Running records, fluency probes, having them do a sort or fill in a graphic organizer to understand their thinking, writing tasks. My goal as a small group reading teacher was to always hear every student read every week. So that's a good way to kind of measure your assessment there. Graph or visualize data, look for patterns, and then share that progress. There's some tools over here that you can use. The math one at the bottom, when we have students do math work, just write a note on it when they turn it in of like how many prompts did it take them to do that, and then see those prompts go down over time. That helps me to understand how much they know and how much they can do independently. So we will talk about data more next week, but that's a teaser. So to put all of this together, we set the schedule, we set the space, we flex our grouping, name the learning target, and then we weave together the content in a way that's most appropriate for our students and their needs, and then we can see progress. So I would love to hear from you all what your one takeaway for improving effectiveness of your small groups is after thinking about that. You can take some processing time. I'm going to stop the recording.
Couple takeaways.